In the context of Indian poetry in English, when one hears the term versatile genius, the name of A.K.Ramanujan immediately springs to one's mind. There is no doubt that Ramanujan was a multifaceted genius. He was a polyglot. He knew Tamil, which was his mother tongue, Kannada, English, Telugu, Sanskrit, and perhaps also a little bit of Hindi. Ramanujan was a poet, a prose writer, a diary writer, a translator, a reviewer, a folklorist, an anthropologist, a linguist, a scholar, a teacher, a traveler, and what not. Love Poem for a Wife 1 is one of A.K. Ramanujan's important early poems. It is a longish poem, but it's a very interesting poem. At least I find it very interesting. As usual, we shall begin by analyzing the title. Love Poem for a Wife. Love Poem for a Wife 1. Love. What is love? Love is intense feeling of deep affection. And in the present context, love should include, love includes or should include romance, perhaps also a little bit of lust. Love includes or should include caring and sharing. Love is profound feeling of strong affection. Love poem. What's a poem? Fundamentally, the use of language can be either prose or poetry. A poem is a piece of writing, a piece of literature which is not in prose. A poem is usually organized in lines and perhaps also in stanzas. If it is a traditional poem, it makes use of the metered line, the rhyme scheme, and the regular stanzaic pattern. In a poem, the diction is very important. The words are carefully chosen. Images are important. And the strength of the poem is as much in its imagery as in its meaning. A poem makes use of figurative language rather than literal language. So the present poem is a love poem. For whom? For a wife. What is the meaning of the word wife? Female spouse. The woman you're married to. Love poem for a wife 1. Why 1? Because the poet is sure that there will be more poems, or at least one more poem bearing the same name. In that case, this is love poem for a wife 1. And the other poem could be love poem for a wife 2. Love poem for a wife 1. The poet writes a love poem for his wife. That is no big deal. It's a love poem, a poem which expresses love, which discusses love, which is saturated in love. And love is profound feeling of deep affection. And this love is focused on the speaker's wife. Love poem for a wife 1. Very natural for a poet to write a love poem for his wife. And not just a love poem for his wife, perhaps a series of poems for his wife, a series of love poems for his wife. And the first of the series is the present poem, Love Poem for a Wife 1. However, everything in Ramanujan is at least slightly problematic. What I have told you, what I have told you is the literal interpretation, the literal reading of the title of the poem. But you must remember that A.K. Ramanujan is the greatest ironist in Indian poetry in English. And everything in Ramanujan is not what it appears to be. If Ramanujan says something, you can be sure that he means everything or other than what he has said, or at least something other than what he has said. If Ramanujan wants to mean something, he says something else. So, the title of the poem under discussion, Love Poem for a Wife 1, is a title loaded with irony. Every word in the title is loaded with irony. Love Poem for a Wife 1. I'm sure that Ramanujan must have smiled when he wrote this title, when he wrote this poem, Love Poem for a Wife 1. How can one write a love poem for one's own wife? One can understand writing a love poem for someone else's wife. But writing a love poem for one's own wife, hilarious. How can one love one's own wife? Impossible. You can love someone else's wife, but not your own wife. At least that must have been the thought process of A.K. Ramanujan while writing this poem. Love Poem for a Wife 1. The poet adores his wife so much that he is not satisfied with writing a love poem for her. He wants to write more than one love poem, perhaps a series of love poems for his wife. If you try to understand the title of the poem in the context of the world of A.K. Ramanujan, you will realize that every word in the title of the poem is used in an ironical sense. Love poem, as I said, impossible for a man of Ramanujan's, A.K. Ramanujan's personality to write a love poem addressed to his own wife. Secondly, Ramanujan is a man who divorced his wife, not once, but twice. A.K. Ramanujan divorced his wife twice, something very rare. He married the same woman twice and divorced the same woman twice. Love Poem for a Wife 1. So, if you're asked to explain the title of the poem, you must make it a point to point out that, as in the case of any other poem of A.K. Ramanujan, this poem is also loaded in irony, and that every word in the title of the poem is used in an ironical sense.